catlovedreamingbeach.com.
I'm going to go pick my kids up after school. The day of trial is over, and I am mind-boggled with the utter corruption. My little fan. How blatantly biased Dr. Andrew Rentschler is, and how he's so obviously a paid shill for the defense. He wasn't even trying to hide it, like, at all. He was straight up denying every bit of evidence. So I'm jumping in. It is Thursday, June 12th, 2025. I literally had my video saved, edited, loaded up, and I was about to premiere it. And then I was driving home and listening to today's counts hearing, and I had said that they didn't testify to the Aruba trip. Those Aruba sisters, they didn't come in, so the jury didn't get to hear how she was so unhinged. However, the judge said the Aruba stuff did come in through Kaylee. So they probably heard even more. Instead of just hearing one person say, the first time I met her, I was actually in the process of hugging John hello, and then I hear her scream at me from across the lobby, fuck you, or who the fuck do you think you are, or something like that. Who the fuck is that? I think that's what she said. So they didn't hear that, but they heard probably a lot more intimate details about the actual argument that was happening in the room in front of Kaylee. I just remembered that Karen wanted 2 rooms, which I would have too. So maybe Kaylee wasn't exactly in the room. Maybe she was in the room next door and she heard it through the wall. Or maybe she did hear it directly. And if I remember correctly, I do, they left Aruba early with the excuse of, oh, we have to get back for the kids to get back to school. But you fucking know when the kids are going back to school before you fly to Aruba for Christmas, New Year's break. So they heard all that. Wow. Plus, whatever else that nobody in the chat is contemplating, and even I haven't considered because I didn't hear it, which was Kaylee's testimony. This could very well be Karen's last night of freedom. Because if they come to a verdict tomorrow and say she's guilty, they are going to take her right then and there, I believe. They're not going to be like, oh, okay, cool, you're guilty, and you can go home, and we'll get you on Monday. I don't think so. So I feel like if Karen don't escapees tonight, that's it. Lock. What's sad? This lighting is so bad. It's very sad. I don't feel one speck of joy in the idea of Karen getting life in prison, guilty on all counts. There's no joy in it. It's just a feeling of, this is what justice is. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. It's tragic. It's bad. It's a terrible feeling. There's no joy in someone having to spend their life in prison because they did a terrible thing. I don't feel joy in that. Maybe some people do. I don't. I don't wish she would go to prison because it makes me feel good inside. I feel that the only way for justice to happen is for her to go to prison for what she's done. And I've said 1,000,000 times at this point, I also believe that if she had acknowledged what she had done, if she said, I am so sorry, I plead guilty, I will take a plea deal, I will pay fines, I will do community service, I will go to rehab, I'll do house arrest. I would take house arrest for 10 fucking years over having to go to prison. Give me 10 years of house arrest with 5 years after 5 years possibility of parole. And maybe she could even be allowed to go to the grocery store or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God. No more driving. You know, she could have done that. She could have, if she had only said the truth. So, girl, I think this is it. Unless those jurors are not as convinced and, you know, or they say, maybe they will say, you know what, let's take the weekend to think about it, to really contemplate it, and maybe they will want to make it seem, you know, as fair as humanly possible. Maybe they don't want to make it seem like they rushed through. Or, you know, a lot of times when jurors know, they know, and they're like, fuck this, I am done. I don't need to drag this out. Why do I need to make a murderer feel good that I contemplated, you know, Friday, over the weekend, and Monday, when the fact is that we know you're guilty. The evidence is clear. You've been lying and accusing innocent people of this for 3 years, and it's time that you face justice, which is now. But that's only if they're all unanimous in agreeing that she's guilty, guilty, guilty. I feel like it's super obvious, but obviously not everybody feels that way. So we'll see.
Okay. Such interviews. On the contrary, the attorneys are obligated to prepare their case as thoroughly as possible and may interview witnesses. I don't know if there's a sequestration order, if this is appropriate, though, where it says during trial, during the course of the trial. I'll just say when preparing for trial.
Yeah, we're joining in the request. I don't know that we included that in our instructions, but we're joining in the almost request for that instruction.
All right. Okay. Expert witnesses, electronic communication. So I'm going to go through the limiting instructions I gave. I need to just do this again here. So electronic communications, I have that on my list. The emotional impact photos, humane practice. We'll get back to consciousness of guilt in a minute. I'm also going to give the prior bad acts instruction. I did that in regard to the Aruba incident, if you want to call it that. I gave a prior bad acts instruction before that testimony came in. I also gave the instruction that I will also give on the state of mind of John O'Keefe as to his state of mind being known by the defendant and the likelihood that she would act on it. So Commonwealth versus Binns in those cases.
Your Honor, with regard to Aruba, we don't believe that there was really any guilty that came in.
I thought it came in through Kaylee. I should say it did come in through Kaylee. That's when I gave the prior bad acts instruction. She testified. Okay. All right, so did I give it any other time that there's another event that I should highlight? I don't think so.
I don't think there was an instruction at that point.
All right. I think I have to add that here. So,
How blatantly biased Dr. Andrew Rentschler is, and how he's so obviously a paid shill for the defense. He wasn't even trying to hide it, like, at all. He was straight up denying every bit of evidence, just like Dr. Marie Russell, just like Dr. Lala Posada, whatever her name was, just like her. He also blatantly outright admitted that he disregarded pieces of broken taillight on the lawn. He claimed he didn't know how they got there. He didn't think they were relevant. He discounted the shoe, the hat, the glass, the straw. He discounted Karen's own words. He discounted the fact that she said herself, I pulled a piece of glass out of his face, even though it could have very easily been a piece of the broken taillight that she just thought was glass. But he just disregarded it all the way. And he also kept stating again and again and again, there was no collision. There's no evidence of any collision. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. Nobody knows what happened. So there was no collision. It's like one half of his fucking mouth he's saying, there's no evidence. Nobody knows what happened. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. And then he's saying, oh, I definitely know what happened. I definitely know that. So what he's basically saying by saying none of those, maybe I should turn off the heated seat. He's saying none of the evidence that showed there was a collision is valuable in my assessment. I mean, I really felt like he was saying, well, I really didn't like that evidence. Yes, that evidence proves there's a collision, but I don't like that because that is definitely not what I'm supposed to say. That's not what I was paid to say. I was paid to say there was no evidence of a collision, and any evidence of a collision wasn't important. There was even one question where his answer, when he was asked about various research, what tests he was doing, things like that, and he said, well, he did the tests to find out what the client wanted to know, which means he was not assessing the scene and all the evidence being presented and assessing if there was an accident or not based on that. What he was doing was saying, well, I'm going to leave out everything that the defendant doesn't want me to consider. And some people might say, well, it was the FBI. But we don't know what the FBI asked him to do. And it's really not relevant, though, because if the FBI had hired him to find out things, but their request was limited in scope, limited with the evidence that he was allowed to consider, or had to consider, or chose to consider, but then he's testifying in a murder trial, it's not appropriate to limit your so-called expert testimony to a very narrow scope of a job that was not what this trial is about. This trial isn't about, did the narrow scope of whoever hired you to do specifically whatever they asked you to do, to find out only specifically what they asked you to do, using only specifically the evidence that they determined was worthy, which just so happened to be all the bits of evidence that proved she hit him. All the evidence that was unfavorable to the defendant is the evidence that was left out. What I wonder is, does the defense actually believe that the jury is that
stupid, that gullible? Wow.
Do you actually believe that the jury is going to fall for that? They have sat there for months now, 2 months, listening, watching, viewing evidence. There was a moment where Dr. Rentschler was literally saying there is no evidence of a collision, while showing on the screen a video that his employee, Dr. Daniel Wolf, had made with the testing that they did, which was literally showing the dummy Rescue Randy being hit exactly as John O'Keefe could have likely had been hit and would have likely had been hit by an SUV exactly like Karen's. Yet there is the video playing with the fucking evidence, and he has the audacity to sit up there on the fucking witness stand claiming he's speaking truth under oath, saying there is no evidence of a collision, while the fucking evidence of the collision which he fucking, his teammate put together is so utterly despicable, disgusting. It's like a kick in the fucking balls. It's like, wow. Last trial, both of those witnesses tried a lot harder to pretend that they were neutral and pretend that they were not there for the defense. They were not defense advocates, and they were absolutely speaking truth, which is part of why a lot of people believed there's no evidence of a collision, because that's what they pushed. When in fact there's tons of evidence of a collision that they tried to hide and lie and pretend didn't exist. And the weak ass fucking desperate Karen Reed loving cunts in the chats clinging to rumors and speculation and lies and bullshit and exaggerations and all kinds of fake, false, untrue things that have been said about all of these innocent witnesses. And it's just so disgusting. Oh, by the way, I think it's over. I thought there was going to be a rebuttal. I thought he was going to bring out the Aruba witnesses. I thought he might bring out Brian Higgins. I thought he was going to lay the groundwork of like, yep, she was a deranged bitch. He's confident. Hank is confident that he's going to win because he's not even doing a rebuttal. So I think they're going to do closing arguments tomorrow, and then they go into deliberation. All right, I'm back home. It's 7:21 p.m. I have some notes that I wrote that I wanted to read. So, Karen Reed, day 31, I wrote, quote, Dr. Rentschler said that his testing or whatever was, quote, constrained with what the client wanted to know. So, again, is he talking about Karen Reed? Is he talking about the FBI? Again, like I said, that's fucking irrelevant, because if you're testifying in a murder trial and there's a bunch of questions that need to be asked, it's absolute bullshit for you to say, well, my research was only this tiny little thing and I ignored all the evidence at the scene and all of the defendant's own words. And I only looked at this very narrow bit of evidence because that's what the client wanted to know. Constrained with what the client wanted to know. Fine, that's fine. So then you should answer all the questions about the things that you don't know about and say, I can't answer that question. That was outside the scope of my study. Therefore, I can't answer the question. I do not know. But what he did instead was say, I did not consider that evidence. However, I know that he was not hit by a vehicle. So you, on the one hand, you discount every single bit of evidence that would have proved he was hit by a vehicle. And then instead of just saying, I don't know because I didn't do the calculations, I did not consider that information, therefore I cannot make a judgment. He said, I did not consider that information because I didn't feel that that was relevant. And then I have made a judgment, which is that he wasn't hit by the vehicle, even though all this evidence proves that it was, but I didn't consider that because it wasn't important. Yeah, that flies, huh? Hopefully right into the trash. And what I'm really hoping is that the jury is really intelligent and that they are going to be pissed off and insulted that the defense actually had the audacity and the fucking nerve to think that they were stupid enough to sit there through weeks of evidence that Karen Reed hit this man and then have the defense witnesses come up here and gaslight the fuck out of those jurors and lie to their faces under oath and tell them there's no evidence that he was hit by an SUV, or there's no evidence she hit him, when they have literally done nothing but prove all the evidence points to one and one thing only. Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her SUV and left him there to die in the snow. Then blamed everybody else. Karen Reed, Day31, fed up. Andrew Rentschler, PhD. Then I listened to a little bit about Tony Bruschi when he was talking to that FBI Robin guy. And that guy said, reasonable doubt is an emotional thing. And he pointed out that the weariness of this trial is likely to be really wearing down on the jurors too, which is what I was saying, that it must feel, if I were to take my own feelings and apply them to potential jurors might feel this way, felt so insulting that they wanted us, the jurors and the public, to sit through hours and hours and hours of fucking irrelevant shit by randos who are just there to lie and deny evidence and to fucking lie in our faces that we didn't see what we saw, that we didn't hear what we heard, that Karen didn't say what she said on video where we could hear it with our own ears and see it with our own eyes, and that we are supposed to just automatically believe that 60 to 70 witnesses are all lying. Every single one of them is lying because they have it out for Karen Reed. And except for the bot farms, the sock puppet farms, and the lonely ass motherfuckers who are just so desperate to be part of a group that you have joined a cult, a Free Karen Reed movement, to defend a murderer from an obvious hit and run drunk driving accident where she hit her boyfriend with her vehicle in some kind of way that led to him being on the lawn and all the evidence that we've gone over for the past 2 months, and for them to just sit there and lie in our faces and think that we are so stupid that they could just pull the rug out from under us, whip the evidence away, slap us in the face and say, you stupid fuck, that's not real, that's not important. The fact is that it was a dog bite and Karen didn't do it, and there was no accident. So how could she have done it if it didn't happen? And don't look over here at all the evidence that proves it. We don't know. We don't know about that. Who cares about that stuff? And I went from trial one, where I also believed, again, I was listening a lot to the lawyers on YouTube that were, now I realize, very, very biased and pro Karen Reed, which I didn't realize at the time. I thought they were neutral. And only after I started to really, I stopped watching the trial through them and started watching it independently, and what I thought I was seeing, I was seeing. And without them in my ear going like, bias, the defense is right, the prosecution is wrong, I started to say, wait, what the fuck? That's not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is that FKR, Free Karen Reed cult people, will literally deny every single piece of evidence against Karen, but at the same time at the same time is willing to accuse dozens and dozens of innocent witnesses of insanely delusional, outlandish claims based on rumors alone. And rumors started by either the defendant herself or a paid shill with a YouTube channel who was bought and paid for and supplied with a bunch of fucking ammo to generate false stories and fake claims about innocent people who were friends and family and loved ones and cared about John, who John cared about. And Karen has twisted it, and now there's this 85% she's innocent on the polls, which I will dig my heels in deep into this and say, if I'm wrong, I'm fucking wrong. Bang the gong of me being wrong, and I don't give a flying fuck, because I know in my heart and soul that she's a fucking murderer. She killed that man, and she framed dozens of people, lied, defamed them, and laughed it up and smirked and duper's delight every single day. Left, right, sideways, up, down, diagonal. This bitch is loving this attention. More notes. The double standard is outrageous. So, tons of evidence from 70 witnesses. Karen Reed lovers say, doesn't count, it's not relevant, it's fake, it was planted, it was all made up. But yet, based on absolutely salacious, made up claims about innocent people, they believe that. That makes sense, huh? No, that makes no fucking sense. The double standard is outrageous. OMG. This is me when I was watching Dr. Rentschler. OMG. He ignored the debris field? He said it's not relevant? He discounted actual evidence? What a fuck. I was so shocked. Also, his level of arrogance and smirking and laughing and like so outrageously, blatantly disrespectful. I know that the jury is going to see that and be like, we don't think that that's cute. You might be a handsome man, I'll give you that much. You're definitely a good-looking guy. Both of the ARCA witnesses were. And Dr. Rentschler is more I like them both. They're both very cute. Dr. Wolf and Dr. Rentschler. I particularly think Dr. Rentschler is even more handsome. I like that handsome face and all that. But that fucking arrogant, laughing, smirking, condescending, there was no collision, there was no collision, there was no collision. You fucking liar. I know you fucking lying. Absolutely outrageous, disgusting, utterly gross. Defense paid bullshitter. Defense mouthpiece. Fucking disgusting, Dr. Rentz. That's what I wrote. And then, wow. Now I'm going to say something controversial that is truly my own speculation. And I plugged it into ChatGPT, which can be completely unhinged and wrong. But sometimes it's also very helpful. So what I basically essentially said is that I believe that, for example, one of the polls I saw tonight, it said, do you think she's guilty, not guilty, lesser charges, or hung jury? And it was 3% saying guilty, 88% saying not guilty. And there were 10,000 votes. And it would lead anyone, any sane person potentially, to just believe, oh my God, this is indicative of the jury, and she is going to get acquitted, or at the bare minimum, a hung jury. A mistrial. And what I think, which is what I wrote in here, is this. What I believe is that that chat and that poll is not actually indicative of a general population of potential jurors who are looking at the case and the evidence, listening to the witness testimony, listening to the questions and the behavior from both sides of the defense and the Commonwealth, listening to everything that the judge does and says, and without an agenda, without coming into this case with a preconceived notion based on things you've heard online, something you've already determined, even, I would say, the first trial, because the first trial was a mistrial. The second trial is not the first trial. There were witnesses and evidence and testimony that they talked about in the first trial that they are not talking about here. You cannot contemplate that in your deliberations if you're doing this fairly. For example, when I talked about how Brian Higgins had testified in the first trial, how Karen had, when he went to say hi to her that one day, and she was like, "Fuck you! Fuck you, my husband's a Boston cop," even though, yeah, bitch, you weren't married to him. And then the Aruba lady's talking about how she was like, "Fuck you!" And that didn't come in. So these jurors cannot contemplate Karen screaming "fuck you" to people. The Commonwealth must have felt that didn't matter. They didn't need that to make their case that she hit him that night. And the fact that Brennan has said no rebuttal witnesses, to my mind, makes me believe that he is 100% convinced that jury knows that she hit him and that they will convict. Because I think he is extremely perceptive and discerning. I think he's good at what he does. And I think that if he was getting the sense that the jury did not believe him and was believing the defense, and he felt like, I really need to do a rebuttal because I really want to bring it home, then there's absolutely no reason he wouldn't have done that. They are legally allowed to. So what that tells me is that he was able to perceive the jury as they were listening and watching the defense's case, and he was able to discern from their reactions, as much as they're supposed to kind of just stay neutral, but they're human beings. He could probably tell they were already on board. Just like the judge said, this jury is growing weary. And that's what I was also saying. Having to be forced to sit there to listen to lies and gaslighting and people paid shills coming on and denying actual evidence to your face that you have seen. It's not about creating reasonable doubt. It's not about actually getting justice. It's about smoke and mirrors and trying to distort and lie to people so that your guilty motherfucking client can walk free despite the fact that she killed a man. And I think that she should go to prison. Oh, so I was going to read this. So basically what I was saying is like, the one of the polls that I saw, and it's like 3%. It's saying 3% guilty. Do you know why it probably says 3% guilty? Not because 3% of people in general who are learning about this trial would think that she's innocent, and the reason that I think that the poll showed 3% guilty is not because I think that 3% of the average person would think that she's guilty and 88% of the average person would think that she's innocent or not guilty, but rather his poll is indicative of his chat, because he has been so pro Karen Reed and so anti the Commonwealth and the prosecution that 97% of the people who thought or think like me that she's guilty have beat it out of there a long time ago. If you are trying to watch a trial and be unbiased and it is literally infiltrated with bots and just crazies, just totally denying, and you've got an albeit handsome and usually unbiased lawyer up here completely unhinged in agreement with with the cult, with a bot farm astroturfed campaign based on bullshit and lies. Not because Karen Reed is a good person and many people were like, this woman she's a pillar of society and she's such a good woman and we are gonna get behind her and free Karen Reed because she's such a good person. No, it was a freaking campaign based on lies and pulling down innocent people and lying about them and claiming that they did crimes that they didn't do, that there's no evidence of, and using tiny little bit of facts, distorting and twisting it into something so far from the truth to make these innocent people look bad, actually subjecting them to being harassed in real life, and to the point where the ringleader of the AstroTurf campaign, which there is plenty of evidence that Karen Reed and her team paid him to do, was arrested and is facing multiple charges of witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and it's not evidence. It's not actual real things that came out about people. But anyway, as I was saying, so, they're only going to be able to deliberate on the evidence that's been presented. But I really believe very few people who know that she's guilty are going to stick around and listen to that chat and even bother to be there to vote, because the rest of the chat ran us away a long time ago. Or we were discerning enough to say, you know what, I'm going to go watch this trial on a stream where I can just watch it without being, bombarded by obvious bias. So let me I'm going to read some of these notes. Polls and comment sections are not representative. Astroturfing and manipulation are real. Astroturfing, which is fake grassroots campaigns, are widespread, especially in emotionally charged cases, whether through coordinated sock puppet accounts, which is multiple accounts run by the same person, or bot farms, or organized harassment and individual people who, for whatever variety of reason, have clung on to the cause. They think that it's true, and the fact that there's so many voices saying the same thing makes them believe, oh, this must be true, kind of like a cult. Kind of exactly like a cult. We feed you slogans. We feed you these little sound bites. We don't provide evidence. We use magical thinking and a lot of blame and accusations, which also have no evidence, but you believe it just because you're just, for whatever reason, wired to believe it. And all of that combined is a goal which creates the illusion of an overwhelming public support of a cause. And in this case, there is strong evidence, patterned talking points, aggressive mob-like comment policing, mass posting across platforms, which is strong evidence of a coordinated narrative campaign supporting Karen Reed and often attacking anyone who questions that, as I experienced in my video the other day. And then YouTube commenters, for instance, attract a self-selecting audience. People watching and engaging are not just random members of society. They are people with a strong opinion and the time to participate. So if 88% are saying not guilty, it does not mean that 88% of Americans or even locals agree. It does mean that 88% of the people participating in that moment in that chat were most likely from the echo chamber or astroturfing cohorts. And yes, of course, it will likely skew heavily in favor of Karen Reed. So the people in the chat who are like, oh my God, 88% of the people think that she's guilty. No, 88% of the people who are there for the chat specifically designed to talk about it, which they know is heavily, heavily, heavily skewed with Karen Reed lovers, of course, it makes total sense. Critical thinking is drowned out by the volume. It says that I am pointing to something profound. The volume of commentary is not the same as quality of reasoning. There are thoughtful people watching the trial and seeing the evidence unfold, but our voices are drowned out, often drowned out, by the repetitive, emotionally charged defense slogans. And when you add up all of these variety of type of accounts, real people who genuinely think that they're part of a cause, and they don't have any awareness that a lot of this is coordinated, fabricated, and it's an actual campaign to try to make people feel passionate about freeing a woman who actually murdered her boyfriend. The evidence in the jury's role. I also said something deeply important to me. The actual jury is going to find her guilty on all 3 counts because the evidence is beyond any reasonable doubt. Doubt at this point would be delusional or fantasy-based and anything but reasonable. And their response was, this is exactly what a fair jury is trained to evaluate. Well, they're taught, yeah. The jury is not supposed to have Twitter mobs, Reddit threads, or YouTube chats in the room. They are asked every day and told at the end of every day, did you do research? Don't do research. Don't read shit. Don't talk to people about shit. Not about the case. And again, there could be anybody who they just genuinely think that she's innocent. They might have had an agenda, or they could be paid, or like I said, maybe that's what they really truly think, or, or the reality is that those jurors are going to go in there and they're going to say, she's guilty. And the defense is trying real hard, awful hard to say to us, to get every single one of their witnesses to say, oh, there was no collision, even though you're looking at all the evidence that there was, and that they're just supposed to gaslight them, and they're going to be like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine. We believe you. Trust me, bruh. It's always such a good defense. But they're instructed to base their verdicts solely on the evidence presented in court, not theories from internet influencers, and not rumors that it's so weird and cringe to see people still clinging to theories that never panned out from the first trial, that the defense never even pushed for. Like the whole Jen McCabe was the mastermind, and the 2:27 a.m. house long to die in cold, and that proved that she did it. And they tried desperately to go that route the first time. And this time, the prosecution came through even harder. Like, bitch, that is not true. And I think that the defense conceded. Well, I know that they conceded because they never tried to push ever in their case at all. I mean, they mentioned it maybe in their opening, or maybe when they questioned Jen McCabe, and then they brought Jennifer Hyde out, who proved beyond any doubt that no, 2:27 was when she had the tab open. And that was clear beyond any reasonable doubt. And even the defense gave that up. And to see losers in the chat still trying to talk about that, it's like, ew, it's so cringe to see that. And then there's people who just make shit up. Like, yeah, they mentioned the garage, and they had that guy who measured, they randomly picked from the mailbox to the front door, even though not one single soul saw John O'Keefe dropped off at the mailbox. They never, well, he measured from the flagpole, but didn't remember it. He didn't put it in the report. And the fact that every single question from the defense was such a cringe and obvious. I mean, yes, it's their job to advocate and try to deflect and try to create reasonable doubt, but it was just so cringe because it was just so fake. Not credible, not believable. So, what are the chances that it's 80 to 90% astroturfing? So here's an honest assessment. Given patterns observed in this case and in others, here is an honest assessment. It is highly plausible that at least 50 to 80% of the loudest online Karen Read is innocent content is astroturfed or cult adjacent, especially when the same slogans, cherry-picked arguments, and copy-paste style replies dominate the discourse. Talking about how corrupt Bev is, talking about how much they hate Hank, saying things like there's no evidence, she's factually innocent. Like, bitch, no. Add that to real people swept up in the movement, those who don't critically examine the evidence, but instead follow charismatic influencers or emotionally charged resonant stories, and you end up with what looks like an overwhelming public opinion, but in reality is a distorted narrative bubble. Final thought, it's not crazy or paranoid to think this way. In fact, this is probably what the situation is much more clearly than what others are thinking it is. When public discourse is hijacked by those with agendas, it takes discipline to stay focused on facts, evidence, and legal standards. The jury system, while imperfect, is currently our best firewall against internet-fueled distortion. And yes, there are some creators who likely see the Karen Read movement as a cash cow, and they platform it, encourage the engagement, profit off the chaos. Even if they're privately skeptical, they are thriving financially by going with the flow of the highly charged campaign, which is an agenda, a biased agenda. So that is my thoughts about this day. Tomorrow there's going to be count discourse. They're going to discuss without the jury exactly what the counts are, counts 1, 2, and 3, what the wording will be, and probably what the jury, the papers, what's that called? Verdict form, or the jury verdict form. It's a formal written document provided to the jury by the judge. It lists each charge or count, that's the counts they're going to discuss, that the defendant is facing. For each count, the jury must check or write guilty or not guilty. If there are lesser included offenses, the form may provide those options as well. And let's see what else it says. Karen Read is facing second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter with the DUI, and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. So how exactly it's going to be worded, how it's going to, their jury instructions are going to be worded, all of that will be decided tomorrow. The jury gets a day off. Then, so that's Thursday, June 12th, 2025, and then Friday, June 13th. Friday the 13th! Ooh. Girl! I'm not usually super superstitious, but oh shit, Friday the 13th is when closing arguments are going to happen, and then they will get the case and go to deliberation. Oh my God, she might be found guilty on Friday the 13th. Okay, so here's some likely wording. Second-degree murder, depraved indifference, extreme atrocity or cruelty, which does not mean intent for anybody who still don't know about that shit. And then wording, did the Commonwealth prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of John O'Keefe with malice aforethought, but without premeditation? Then they would have to say yes or no. 2, motor vehicle manslaughter with a DUI. Did the Commonwealth prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, while under the influence of alcohol, operated a motor vehicle recklessly or negligently, and that this conduct caused the death of John O'Keefe? And then 3, leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death. Did the Commonwealth prove that the defendant was involved in a motor vehicle accident resulting in death, knew that they had caused injury or death, and failed to stop and report it to authorities? So those are like potential wording. The verdict form will also list each of those counts separately, and the jury will be asked to mark either guilty or not guilty. But it will also have options for lesser included offenses, e.g. involuntary manslaughter instead of second-degree murder if the judge allows it, and the special findings, e.g. whether she was under the influence. The jury instructions, what the judge tells the jury. The judge will read aloud and give in writing the jury instructions, which will explain the law the jury must apply. They cover 1, the elements of each charge. 2, the presumption of innocence. 3, the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. 4, what constitute direct and circumstantial evidence. 5, how to assess witness credibility. 6, the role of the jury as fact finders. 7, how to deliberate together and reach a unanimous verdict. The jury instructions are often 30 to 60 pages long and tailored to the case. Attorneys usually argue over the exact language the judge should use, and that is what's happening tomorrow, which is Thursday, June 12th. Why'd you get the date wrong? Motherfucker, even ChatGPT can get the date wrong. Even a bot can get the date wrong. All right, so Wednesday, jury instructions finalized. No court for the jury. Friday, the 13th, June 13th, closing arguments for both sides will summarize their case. Expected 1 to 2 hours per side, although actually she said she might be willing to do 1 hour and 15 minutes each. Then the judge delivers the jury instructions. And then the jury receives the case with all the evidence, the video clips, the jury instructions, the verdict forms, their fucking memories, their notes, their opinions, and they get to go deliberate, possibly late in the afternoon. If the jury is efficient and unified, yes, a guilty verdict could land on Friday the 13th. But it's also very possible they take longer and come back the next week. And I would say that my opinion is if they believe that she's guilty, it's going to be decided on Friday. They're not going to want to come back Monday. They're not going to want to think about it the whole weekend. If they all know that she's guilty, she will be going to prison this weekend. But if they do not come to a verdict by the end of the day, I'm going to say that there's holdouts. It's not going to be easy. And that maybe she will end up getting off or getting another hung jury, another mistrial. I really hope not. His family deserves justice. And I think that the jury will know that. I think that if the jury believes the evidence the way I've viewed it, they will say, she is guilty beyond any reasonable doubt. She did hit the man. She had malice. She had hatred in her heart. She had a chance to take responsibility and accountability. And although you can never make it right when you kill somebody, she could have at least started the healing process, owned up, done the bare minimum, gotten a plea deal, gotten house arrest, gotten probation and parole, gotten some fines, did some community service, whatever the fuck, you know, stay sober, go to rehab, all the things. But instead, she decided she was going to blame all of his friends. And there's many people who are like, the judge is so corrupt, she didn't let in all this stuff. Yeah, because it was not relevant. They proved that those people were innocent. They had no evidence. You cannot just accuse people and drag them out onto the witness stand and accuse them of lying and of murder and of collusion and of cover up and framing with absolutely no evidence. And a few butt dials and the fact that somebody got rid of their phone is just actually not evidence of murder. And again, like I started off with, the free Karen Read cult people will discount reams and reams and reams and reams and reams of evidence that prove Karen Read is guilty. Even her so-called experts got up on the stand and had the audacity to say, yep, you're damn right, I discounted that evidence. Her own words, all the taillight, his clothing, the DNA, the not DNA, the blood, the this, the that. I discounted it all because I want to be able to say that there was no accident. And if I include any of that stuff, I can't say it. And the jury's going to see that. They will. I really believe they will. And if they don't, I'm going to move on to the next thing and see you in the next one.
Okay, so I wanted to pop in and do this. I got a little chart together. I'm making my dinner. You can't see it. So I thought, let me talk about this while I'm waiting for my vegan mac and cheese to get ready. Oh, I have to season it. So I'm going to do that while I read what this is. So I was curious, what are the various things that could happen and what's the maximum and minimum that she will be, Karen, that she will go to prison? First of all, the question is of, will Karen Read be automatically taken into custody tomorrow if she is found guilty tomorrow? The answer is yes. Especially considering flight risk. They do not just let people who were just accused or just convicted of being guilty. I'm gonna leave that on. The fan is on, but it's hot as a motherfucker, so I'm not gonna turn it off. So if you hear that, I literally have two fans on, so blow. Okay, so if she is found, even if she is found, so I was trying to figure out if they say that she, okay, so there's a variety of ways that she could be found guilty and not guilty of the various charges. Okay, so here we got, first charge is second degree murder. Second charge is motor vehicle manslaughter with a DUI, driving while under the influence. The third count is leaving the scene of a fatal accident. So she could be found not guilty of all three, and then she would go home. And then the case is over, and there's nothing left to do. If some people are like not in agreement, if it's not unanimous in all three, then it would be a mistrial. She would go home. And then the Commonwealth has to decide if they're going to charge her again, if so, when, etc. Or they might decide, fuck it. That was 2 trials. We can't get her convicted. We did the best we could. Or she could be found not guilty of second degree murder. She could not be found guilty of only number 3, because if she's found guilty of number 3, leaving the scene of a fatal crime, that means that she had to know that she did it. Because if she had no idea that she did it, how can you charge her? So one scenario saying, they could say, well, we don't think she did it. We don't think that she hit him. we don't think that they proved that she hit him. And they can say, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. That's her best case scenario, okay? Then they could say, you know what, we do think that she hit him, but we don't think that she knew it. She didn't mean to do it. She didn't even know she did it. It was such a total accident. And so we're going to just, what is it called when? Jury nullification. When they're like, you know what, we think this person did the thing, but we just like her so much. She's just such a good person. She's such a kind-hearted person. We're not gonna convict her. We think she should go home. Or they could say, you know what, we think that she did it, but we think that between those nasty texts from Trooper Proctor and the fact that, even though the reason that they used solo cups and a leaf blower was literally because it was the middle of a blizzard and it was literally now or never. Get this information in the only way that we can. I hope I didn't just spit into the dinner, but if I did, it's just for me and the kids. I don't know. I don't like the way this feels. I mean, I do by the food. Ew. Did your mother teach you that? Of course she did. Don't fuck around with your hair by the food. Comb your hair at the dinner table. You don't play with your hair at the dinner table. Oh. Anyway. Okay, so I think I'm going to put some more cheese in this. Vegan cheese that is. Okay, so jury nullification, they might say, you know what, we think she suffered enough. We think that even though we think she probably did it, there is a lot of doubt. There could be some people who are like, I think she did it, but I don't know. I think, Dr. Wolf's dimples just had me at hello. Even though he was obviously a paid shill. That's the one thing about all of the witnesses. See, I just don't like the way my head looks in this lighting with my hair. Okay. I just feel like it was so obvious that all of the defense witnesses clearly had an agenda to say, oh, there was no, it never happened. Never happened. She can't be guilty because it never happened. All the air out so it doesn't go moldy. Only use 1.5. I think that's enough. And I would get like the Colby Jack. They have a Mexican version, but my son just prefers this. So all right. All right, now let's get into if she does get convicted. What are the variety of things she could get convicted of, and what would be the maximum minimum sentences? And if she is found guilty, what's the difference between concurrent versus consecutive, and how would that change the total, minimum, maximum in behind bars before she's eligible for parole? All right, so let's do this. So if she's found, so again, she could not be found guilty of number 3 alone, because if she left the scene of a fatal crime, she would have had to know she did it. So she could be found guilty of 2 and 3, where they think she did it and they know she left. They don't think it's elevated to second-degree murder, which really only requires that to say that when she did it, she basically was in a position where she should have known that driving under those conditions was reckless, was so reckless that it literally made her Lexus a deadly weapon. And even if she had absolutely no intention, people in the chats, the pro-Karen crazies, the pro-Karen cults, the pro-Karen lovers. Now I think I might need to add a little bit more milk. Vegan. And it's so this is the soy vegan soy, organic, unsweetened, and please hold. almost completely out of this. I also put this in it. Okay, so let's not get the crusty. All right, so let's say they're like, yeah, you did it. Again, I find it hard to believe that they would say she did it and not find her guilty of second-degree murder, because if they think she did do it, I feel like it is elevated to second-degree murder simply from the fact that she had, like, her math is like, well, I really only had 3 drinks. 3 doubles, that is. Okay, bitch. As far as I knew, you call it 6 drinks, you call it 3 doubles, but 3 doubles means a double is 2, and 3 times 2 is 6, you fool. So if you had 3 doubles, you still had 6 drinks, bitch. You had 6 drinks worth of alcohol. Blame it on the alcohol. No, I don't think so. Please hold again. I thought I was going to get through this chart in 10 minutes. I'm going to add more because I added so much milk. But I got to add more. Now I'm going to have to up all the spices again. So, okay. So let's see. If she's found guilty of 2 and 3. 2 has a minimum sentence of 5 years, maximum, hold on, the maximum was 10 or 15, shit. All right, I popped this up real quick, but the 10 minutes is about to be over, so, and I'm adding some more salt. This one is all right, my alarm is gonna go off in like 3 minutes. I have this up, but I'm going to actually read over my phone onto the computer screen because I can't see this. It's way too small. And this chart was wrong anyway, so I covered it up with the text. Okay, so again, if she's found not guilty on all 3 charges, all 3 counts, case is over, trial is over, she goes home, she's a free woman, they cannot recharge her. If the jury is not unanimous, if they can't decide tomorrow, they'll have to go home for the weekend, come back, deliberate on Monday. If you can't decide on Monday, they'll have to go home again, and the judge might make them keep coming back. I don't know how many days, but there is an expectation of a serious deliberation. I don't remember how. Let me see if I can find out. Okay, so the jury began deliberations June 25th of 2024. They worked for about 4 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then again, so they rested Saturday, Sunday. They came back on Monday and then declared a deadlock. On Friday, they deliberated 22 hours. By Monday, after returning, they had reached around 25 hours before delivering the deadlock note and prompt for final instructions. And shortly after receiving their second deadlock note on Monday, and after being instructed with the dynamite Tui Rodriguez charge, the judge declared a mistrial a few hours later, after they were like, nah, babe. 4 days of deliberation, 23 to 25 hours, and it was ended Monday, July 1st, 2024. So it's going almost on a year. And well, let's see. All right, I'm going to read. Dear Judge Cannoni, despite our commitment to the duty entrusted in us, we find ourselves deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind. The divergence in our views are not rooted in a lack of understanding or effort, but deeply held convictions that each of us carry, ultimately leading to a point where consensus is unattainable. We recognize the weight of this admission and the implication it holds. To continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. And again, there was absolutely no mention of being unanimous on counts 1 and 3, even though they tried to push that later, and it was absolutely not upheld because that is not how the law works. All right, now back to this chart. Okay, so if she's found guilty of manslaughter, that is hold on, let me see if I can. 2 hours later. Okay, this is wrong. A little bit. So the minimum sentence for second-degree murder in Massachusetts is 15 years. Eligible for parole after 15 years. Then the maximum sentence is life. So vehicular manslaughter with a DUI, the minimum sentence is 5 years. The maximum is 20 years. And then leaving the scene of a fatal crime, the minimum sentence is 1 year mandatory. Same with the 5 years mandatory. And 10 years maximum. Okay. And then, all right, even though this is like typos and stuff, this pretty much shows what I really wanted to show, which is that if she's found guilty of second-degree murder, if she's found guilty of all three, vehicular manslaughter with DUI and leaving the scene of fatal crime, but the sentences are concurrent, then she will be eligible for parole after 15 years. And it will not add, even though her overall sentence can be longer with these additional min-max, her eligibility for parole will remain at 15 years no matter what, if it's concurrent. If the sentences are consecutive, then she would have to do the 15 years minimum for second degree. She would have to do the minimum 5 years for manslaughter. Then she'd have to do the minimum 1 year for leaving the scene of a fatal crime. So if it's all consecutive, then she would not be eligible to leave prison for 21 years, which would be 15 years for second-degree murder. The 5 years minimum she must serve for vehicular manslaughter with a DUI, again, if this is consecutive, plus the 1 year minimum for leaving the scene of a fatal crime, leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Again, so if she's guilty in all three and they're all consecutive, she cannot get out for 21 years. If she's guilty on all three, but they are concurrent, she can be eligible to get out in 15 years. If she's only guilty of manslaughter and leaving the scene of a fatal crime, and it's concurrent, then she would be eligible for parole after, well, actually, yeah, she could potentially get parole or leave after 6 years. If it's concurrent, that means that the 5 years minimum and the 1 year minimum would be at the same time. So she could potentially, the smallest amount that she might get if she's found guilty of counts 2 and 3, and the judge decides that they're concurrent, not consecutive, then she could be out in 5 years. However, if the judge says no, they're going to be consecutive, then she would have to wait 6 years. If it's all three concurrent, she has to wait 15 years. And if it's all three consecutive, she has to wait 21 years and could spend the rest of her life in prison. I hope that's clear, even though it kind of bounced all over the place. But I really wanted to add that into this so that people have a sense of how much time she's actually facing. This was the other one that I was making. I was trying to make, so let's see, I'll read the notes at the top that I put. It's just repeating because I wanted to make sure I could see it. Please note, if Karen is found not guilty on all charges, then the trial is over. She goes home free. She can never be recharged on these charges. She could potentially face civil charges. However, if she's found not guilty on all charges, it's likely that the civil cases will be dismissed because there's unlikely that they would find her guilty, or excuse me, it's unlikely they would find her liable if she's found not guilty. Also, if the jury is not unanimous, it will result in a hung jury, which is a mistrial. Karen will go home, but the Commonwealth may decide to retry her. That's up to them. All right, and then just to, let's see, I'll pop a little bit over here so you can see the chart. Let's see if it makes any sense. So on the far side over here, we've got not guilty on second, guilty on vehicular manslaughter, DUI. Not guilty on second, guilty on leaving the scene of a fatal crime. Not guilty on second, guilty on counts 2 and 3, vehicular manslaughter with a DUI and leaving the scene of a fatal crime. Guilty on second, guilty on vehicular, so this one is guilty on the second. Guilty on second, guilty on vehicular manslaughter with a DUI. Guilty on leaving the scene of a fatal crime, guilty on all counts, and then the count, the minimum, the maximum, years before parole for concurrent sentencing, years before parole for consecutive. And so I'll move out of the way. If you want to pause it, you can take a look. And I don't know if this data is actually correct, though. This was one of the things I was trying to do with ChatGPT. So the minimum, I think this is wrong. I think this is actually 5 years, not 2.5. Maximum is 20. Okay, leaving the scene of a fatal crime, minimum is 1 year, maximum is 10. So these numbers are not right for the most part, but the years before parole, I think, are correct. 5, 1, 5, 15, 5, 1, 15, and then if they're consecutive years before parole, so we've got 5, 1, 6, 15, 5, 1, 21. So if she's guilty on all counts down here and it's consecutive, she won't be eligible for parole for 21 years. If it's concurrent, 5 years. So if she's found guilty on any of the counts 2 and 3, and it's concurrent, then her minimum would be it would be 5 years before she could get out on parole. She can't be found guilty of only count 3, which is here. She can't be found guilty of leaving the scene of a fatal crime, because if she was leaving the scene of a fatal crime, she would have had to have done it. So she can't. And see you in the next one. Bye. Don't forget to hit like, hit share, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification so you never miss a video, and join me. Subscribe for free. Subscribe as a member here on YouTube and also on Patreon and on my website, which is all under the same name, Cat, K-A-T, Cat Love Dreaming Peach.com. CatLoveDreamingPeach.com.